Welcome to a special BQ Prime series of conversations with leading business and technology leaders that focuses on challenges and opportunities faced by this very important sector, especially post the pandemic. This series is brought to you in association with Oracle. The aim of this series is to increase awareness and define the way forward on critical areas that govern the BFSI space when it comes to data insights, customer experience, risk mitigation, as well as security concerns around data and prevention of fraud, and also perhaps looking at some of the newer technologies that BFSI has been adopting, like multi-cloud, blockchain, artificial intelligence, etc. Today, we have with us a banking leader who is highly respected for the banking and technology acumen that she brings, not only to the bank that she works in, but also the nation. I'd like to welcome Shalini Warrier, Executive Director of Federal Bank and Business Head Retail. Ms. Warrior was earlier Chief Operating Officer at the bank, and she has strong global experience in the banking sector. Thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Ma'am, I'd like to begin really with the pandemic that's been front and center for us over the last couple of years. But in your experience, as you've navigated this pandemic successfully, what are some of the key factors that you see for achieving success in digital banking in this new normal? And again, we are talking about an era where digital is front and center because banks have taken to digital with a vengeance during the pandemic to deliver services to customers. And customers today also are far more digital friendly. They're far more accepting of digital ways of doing business. But there is, of course, still some uncertainty around the broader economic environment.
Thank you very much for having me on the session. And yes, I think the pandemic is the overarching conversation across not just financial services, but all industries. And as you rightly pointed out, it's not just about the past, but it's also about the future. Coming to your specific question on, digital and what does it mean? Obviously, the pandemic has, to a very large extent, been the trigger for a large amount of digitization, not just amongst customers, but also amongst employees. I think the main point that the pandemic has resulted in is the drive towards digitization. And to your question as to what are the keys for achieving digital success, therefore, in what I think you framed as the stop-start economy, I think the first and the overarching aspect of digitization that will ensure sustainability of what has been started is the user experience. I think customers, to make sure that they stay digital, to make sure that they continue on the digital journey, it's imperative for banks like us to ensure that the user experience is really smooth and stable. I'll give you an example of what we've done in that respect. So even through the pandemic, we actually revamped our entire Fed Mobile, which is our mobile banking app. And we made the user experience as seamless as possible. We introduced a whole host of new features, like, for example, what we did with credit cards or what we've done with a couple of other features on it. We've introduced a lot of new features into the whole proposition, and that has ensured that the customers using Fed Mobile and the value of the transactions that they're using through it keeps going up, and it remains sustainable. And that's what we've done for retail customers. But if you look at corporate customers, where the challenges on digitization are a little different, what we've really done is the Fed eBiz, which is our flagship product for corporate customers, has been materially enhanced and revamped with features to make it make the experience for the customer perfect. So the main key, the first driver to ensure that customers get onto the digital journey and stay on that digital journey is the user experience. I keep saying to my team members that today customers expect the app to be as smooth as ordering food on Swiggy or booking a cab on Uber. But the second aspect then becomes important because customers expect safety and security. They are dealing with financial transactions, and unless we invest in security, unless we give them the assurance that their transactions are safe and secure, they will not stay digital. They will not sustain themselves as digital. The third aspect of it is reliability. Because of the millions of transactions that are being done digital, I think you know enough about UPI, the billions that are being done, etc. What customers expect is they know that sometimes a transaction may not go right. I think they understand that. But what they really expect the bank to do is tell me what happened immediately and solve it for me. So the whole reliability aspect of it is important because I think you can relate to it. If I'm as a customer done a transfer of 20,000 rupees, and for some reason it has not gone through, I go in with an inherent hesitation. Maybe my next transaction will not go through. But if the bank has come back to me immediately and turned that around and said, yes, we've taken care of your transaction, here is the answer, then it increases my confidence. So the success for digitization is really around the user experience, safety when it comes to banking transactions, the whole security aspect of it, and the reliability and making sure that you go back with responses. So I think that's what makes a difference to customers from a digital standpoint. And whether it is a stop, start, or otherwise, Ivor, these are basic tenets that I think we need to put in place. And we in the bank have been striving to give customers that experience.
Thank you for those insights, ma'am. Another lesson from the pandemic that I want to look at quickly was that agility became very, very important. And when we talk about agility, often in the fintech space or in the broader finance space, it's fintech firms that are pointed out to because they are nimble, they're driving a lot of innovation, and it is therefore perhaps imperative that even large banks learn from some of these firms in terms of innovation, the agility models they deploy, DevOps, etc. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how you are embedding some of these within your bank so that you all also gain from the same level of agility?
So there are two parts to it in my view, Ivor. First, I think things like innovation, DevOps are honestly not just the prerogative of fintechs. Banks like us have embedded it completely. I'll give you a couple of examples. When it comes to innovation, we've been one of the banks that has carved out the whole digital banking unit as a separate business unit by itself. The head of digital banking actually reports into me directly and doesn't report into IT or ops or into the product side of things, etc. Is a head who reports directly to me. And he's got a team of members whose only occupation really is looking at what is the future likely to be. So that's and innovation comes from that culture. You can't demand innovation. You have to build the culture of innovation. So that's what we've done. DevOps is something we extensively use in our entire IT space, etc. And there are a whole host of techniques we've put in place. But I think the broader point you make is, this whole aspect of fintechs, I think, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Federal Bank has been in the forefront of the philosophy and embedding that philosophy that fintechs are collaborations. They are not competitors to banks. And we believe extensively in that philosophy. We learn a lot from those fintechs. We learn about how they think about user experience, how they do customer research, how focused they are on certain segments of the customer, and they go kind of tooth and nail to see how they can serve the needs of those customers. So we learn all of that from them. But we also learn from the fact that we're collaborating with them, and therefore it's giving us a reach beyond what we had. So we believed in the philosophy that we are branch light, distribution heavy in Federal Bank. What that really means is, if you go back in time, I got to about 5 years back, we had expanded our branch presence extensively. But over the last 4-5 years, we've really not expanded that. What we've now focused on is alternate means of reaching the customer, because ultimately that's our objective. We have branches about 1,280, and they're doing a great job. But we've also invested in relationship managers, in alternate channels like telesales, and now fintechs are a channel for distribution for us. So we are a bank who's partnered with 2 neobanks in the country, both of which have given us a reach far beyond what we would have normally done with just our so-called traditional channels. So they've given us a customer reach to a certain profile of customers and a certain number of customers, which are kind of an overlay and higher than what we would have got traditionally. So that's how we collaborate with fintechs. We learn from them, they learn from us. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship, actually.
Thank you for those insights, ma'am. One of the key technology trends that I really wanted to bring in was, in the last couple of years, banks have taken to AI, machine learning, etc. And what has happened is that there has been a far greater focus on automation in this new normal. Also, one of the issues has been how do you leverage some of these technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, etc. Not just from the usage perspective, but also maybe from the greater ethical perspectives. And then, of course, how do you really automate smarter? How do you bank smarter? And all of this to define new levels of customer experience. And then, at the heart of all this, how does all this make banking more secure and ensure better compliance, reduce chances of fraud? So can you tell us a little bit about what Federal Bank is doing and what is your vision going forward when it comes to some of these technologies?
A very, very valid point, Ivor. I think traditionally banks have looked at AI, machine learning, and even blockchain to some extent on making the customer experience smoother, making operational efficiency more effective, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you've brought in an angle on fraud detection, and I'd like to talk about that specifically since your question is on that. And I'll take it again in a couple of parts. First, if you look at artificial intelligence and machine learning, and I'll consider both of them together because actually machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. The overarching umbrella is artificial intelligence. The fact remains that traditional fraud detection methodologies have always been post facto, have always been with a limited set of data and whatever humans can do on it or traditional techniques can do on it. Today, fraud detection has become much, much more pervasive and much, much more proactive and much, much more 24/7. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what we're doing. So we have a certain relationship where millions of person-to-merchant transactions are processed through that relationship. We have a relationship with an entity called Bharat and Pay, which does lots of person-to-merchant transactions. Traditionally, we would have done fraud detection. We would have done it more, on a T+1 basis. You take all the data and then look at it on a T+1 basis and then identify if there were any out of pattern. And that would have been still difficult because of the number and the volume. Now, with our capabilities in machine learning, etc., we've been able to do it 24/7, do it, arrive at trends and taking into account seasonality, taking into account time of the day, taking into account the nature of the value of the transaction and a whole host of metrics. And to some extent, therefore, we've made it proactive to say that this particular merchant is showing us little signs of concern. Let's go and check what is happening on them. And if we find that, yes, those concerns are there, we can do actions like block the transactions, etc. So I think the benefits we're getting out of AI and machine learning for fraud detection, whether it is in this person-to-merchant example or in our own debit card transactions, we do, again, millions of debit card transactions, is that it's become 24/7. It's able to now predict a lot more accurately with less false positives over there. So you spend time on the right kind of transactions. It's able to obviously crunch a lot more data, seasonality, time of the day, hour of the day, etc. And the speed to detect, therefore, is much higher. This whole thing has therefore helped us to elevate the whole use of machine learning and artificial intelligence in fraud detection. You spoke about blockchain, so I'll talk a minute about blockchain. I think blockchain, by its very nature, blockchain is a capability that gives more transparency. And where we therefore find it more useful is two kind of areas, one which we've already done and one which is work in progress. The first is on remittances. As you know, the Federal Bank is a big processor of inward remittances from overseas countries, direct remittances. About 18% market share is what we have. So one of the aspects on this is, and it's an operational risk, that if you don't reconcile the transactions correctly, you could end up with issues. The partner believes he's remitted the money. We may not have got it for some reason. Some technical decline could have happened. A business decline could have happened. And reconciliation, therefore, is a full-fledged activity to prevent potential operational risk and prevent reputation risk. So we've done this experiment now with blockchain with one of our partners in the Middle East. And the whole attribute of transparency helps us to ensure that reconciliation is virtually both are seeing what they're seeing at the same time, and that's how blockchain helps. That's one example. I think the largest chunk of benefits we will get will be when it gets embedded into a trade finance kind of transaction. That's something we're working with industry partners on. It's not something a bank can do by itself because there are many parties to a trade finance transaction. There's an importer, exporter, importers bank, exporters bank, sometimes a correspondent bank in between. And in the trade transaction today, the biggest concern we have on fraud is whether these papers are genuine, etc., because we're dealing with paper. But when you go into blockchain, everybody has the node, everybody sees it, and therefore frauds are easier to detect. So I think to your point, traditionally banks looked at AI, ML, etc., for marketing analytics, for customer service, like what we do with Fedi, for example, our chatbot. But I think it's beyond that. The biggest users now are actually our transaction monitoring and fraud prevention units, our vigilance units who are using this extensively. And I think that's where the world is going. Federal is very committed to it and is investing in this.
Ma'am, regulation is also perhaps getting tougher across the world, especially in Europe, the continent that's driving much of this with regard to privacy, etc. Now, with the challenges that banks face around money laundering, fraud, etc., how are banks like yours really leveraging technology to stay on top of some of these newer regulatory regimes? And especially the new normal that we are entering in. And of course, at the heart of all this, how do you all do better on risk management, which is very crucial to get success right in this new normal?
First, I think, I don't know whether it would be appropriate to say regulation is tighter, Ivor. I think it's appropriate. The world is changing so much, and I think it's appropriate that regulation keeps one. What we say internally and what I believe in is, if there is no regulation, God forbid something goes wrong, that's when people kind of wake up and say, oh, we should have had a regulation. So I think it's being proactive, etc. So I think that's one part of it. But your broader point is the use of technology or RegTech as it's called. And I think risk management at an overall sense. So I'll step back and first look at risk management. I think the bank has a culture of risk management like everybody. And we believe very strongly in what we call the 3 lines of defense. The 3 lines of defense are the first line of defense is really the front end. The front end is really the custodian of compliance, custodian of making sure no issues happen. And that's one aspect of it. Then you have the second line of defense, which are the risk owners like our compliance department, our colleagues in risk management. They're the second line of defense. And the third line of defense is audit, the entire internal audit. And if you look at it, technology is becoming all pervasive in all 3 areas. A couple of examples. In the first line of defense, if you look at it, what we've done over the last, I think the journey started about 4 or 5 years back, is embed a lot of the controls within the front end system so that when you have 12,000 employees, 1,080 branches, to ensure that they all think alike, they all work alike is sometimes difficult. So you've got to make the controls more systemic in general. You've got to make sure that the system knows what needs to be done, and therefore the person will not lose sight of it. So we have innumerable examples of how and I don't mean traditional maker checker controls, but beyond that, how do we make sure that the system pops up and says, hey guys, have a look at this again. I think there is something that you need to do. Or the system gives you at least on a T+1 basis, sends a set of exceptions to the branch head and say, these look like exceptions. Can you have a look at it? So that's some of the technology we've used at the front end. I'll then move to the third line of defense, which is audit, which is, I think, the area where technology is making a huge amount of change. Gone are the days when you needed to get all the audits done at the branch through a, literally tick back. Some of it will still happen, but a large part of it has been driven now by computer-assisted audit techniques. So my internal audit department is perpetually running a range of tools on the system and picking out potential exceptions and saying, hey guys, please have a look at these exceptions. Something seems to be there. What is the root cause of it? What do we do to address? So I think to your point, risk management and the overall adherence to regulations has had to move towards becoming less people dependent and more systemic in nature. Yes, overarching all this is always the need for training. People have to recognize why those controls are there and understand it and imbibe it in their culture. But I think systemic controls are playing a very big role in ensuring that regulation and internal policy are complied with.
Thank you for those insights, ma'am. At the heart of all of this, and we've spoken quite a bit today about banking and technology, at the platform level, or perhaps the infrastructure level of this entire technology stack that powers banks today is the multi-cloud approach. How do you think banks can benefit from adopting this multi-cloud approach to succeed in the new normal and to beat back some of the challenges faced? And what is Federal Bank's strategy to take advantage of this multi-cloud model?
The biggest advantage that banks like us get from cloud and the use of cloud, one is, I think, the scale up, scale down capability. The huge benefit that when you need computing power, typically you would have to buy it and buy it in such a way that it's taken care of the peaks. During Diwali, there is a peak. During March, there is a peak, but June things go down because people are on summer vacation, whatever those. So I think the scale up, scale down is really definitely one of the big advantages. The second advantage we get from cloud is, and this goes back to the point of, most of these cloud providers are renowned technology people, whether it's Oracle or anything. So their investment in safety and security tends to be all pervasive, tends to be the best in class, tends to be the cutting edge of technology. While banks can do it individually, I think it would be still much more difficult for banks. Whereas for tech giants like these, it becomes much more accessible to them. So the second is the cutting edge technology from a safety and a security aspect of it. The third is definitely costs, because economies of scale will kick in. So if you look at all these benefits, banks like us it would be foolish for banks like us not to look at the cloud as a platform in which we can grow. So we've adopted a point which says cloud first. We will first evaluate, can this be done on the cloud? If yes, we will go ahead and work with and we work with all multi-cloud partners. Each one depends on, in some instances, Oracle works out for something. In some instances, we are open to working with all of them. So we first check, is cloud possible, not possible? If only the answer for that is for some reason, either because it's too core to us and therefore we need it to be on-prem, or there is a regulation around it which says, please don't put this on the cloud, keep it on-prem, then we would take it on-prem. But even on-prem nowadays, Ivor, is a lot of it is more private cloud oriented. Gone are the days when you had separate servers for each of these items. It's all now shared servers and partitioned, and it's virtual space that is used. So I think the multi-cloud approach is applicable for both in on-prem and on cloud. And we are well on that journey. We've partnered with all the cloud providers. We work extensively with them. We challenge ourselves to say, why not on the cloud? So we're doing some work, for example, on a new CRM solution, and that has automatically been on the cloud. We haven't even thought about bringing it on-prem. So that, I think, is where we're going with this. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. My final question is related to the future of work, which is so very important in the times that we live in. We're really moving into a completely new future of work because one of the things that has happened in the pandemic is that hybrid working or even remote working became very, really big. And that is something that people never expected to happen quite as quickly. But the pandemic really accelerated all of these trends. Now, in banking, you are very customer facing. There are a certain number of people in branches who have to be there. And then again, there are people who have to be at the back office. But so when it comes to your perspective, when it comes to remote working or hybrid working in the FSI sector, how do you really see all of this playing out in the future?
So I think it's a very good question. And if you go back in time to March of 2020, and you'd asked a banker, can you work from home? The first response would be impossible. How can you even think of it? And banking as an industry was never known for work from home. A software industry would do it one day a week. Consultants any of the big four would do it, etc. But banks had never even thought of it. So yes, we had to kind of rally around and do it. So I'll talk employees first. Clearly, the challenge for us has been that in our branches, we are not able to do much work from home. There is still requirements around having to serve customers physically, having to be there at the branch to ensure that customer needs are met. But we did do an intervention there, which helped us. In June of 2020, we introduced something called Fed Swagat, which is like an app booking thing. Like, if you visualize passport offices and how you had to book to go to the passport office, something akin to that is what we did on the web. And recently we revamped that to include an iOS and Android app also, which enables customers to just book an appointment. They can choose the branch. They can say, I want a gold loan, or I have to execute some loan documents, or whatever the basic requirements, which cannot be digitized. So they can book the appointment. All they need to do is come to the branch 5 minutes before that. There is a list out there. They get a reference number, tick, they go finish their work and come back. So that has helped us to ensure social distancing, no crowding, etc. So that's how we've handled. I think that was one intervention we did. And like I said, earlier this year, we actually enhanced it with an Android and a web and an iOS solution because we thought it was still important for customers to be able to book that. And we do a lot of appointments through that. So that helped us at one end. The second challenge for us was the call centers. Traditionally, call centers are a very big mode for customers to get in touch with us, and particularly during a pandemic, for something that they would have probably walked across to the branch. Now they're calling us up. So call volumes were high. And call centers were always, from a safety and a security standpoint, very much on premise. You had to see the agents there. You had to make sure. So we've now worked a very well approved technology which takes the agents and allows them to work at home with a lot of controls around it. Controls down to the basic that it detects mobile phones, it detects somebody over your shoulder, it shuts you down if you have any movement of that kind, etc. Because these are young recruits who've joined us recently and therefore need those controls. So now call centers are such that even otherwise, we've started now about 40% working from home, 60% from the office, so that we can keep social distancing norms and BCP. So the first was the Fed Swagat, the second was the call center and a lot of work, and the third was our own employees in head office kind of functions, Ivor, which you can't do at home, but we had to make sure that because they're dealing with customer data, they're dealing with a lot of confidential information, we had to put a lot of security norms around it, which we normally would not have thought about if it was in the office. So we used the help of one of the renowned company to do a full audit of our work from home capability, and they identified a couple of gaps which we addressed. So today it's quite easy. As an example, I'm working from home today and I have access to all my requirements. I'm doing all my meetings. I have nothing, but I'm just working from home for a couple of days and then I'll get back to the office. So we rotate that from a social distancing standpoint. So to your point, about 16, 17 months back, this would have not even been a conversation we would have had. But today, we have that capability, and God forbid a third wave comes. I hope it doesn't. We will ensure that we are able to work from home quite effectively.
Thank you, ma'am, for the time that you spent with us today. Thank you for telling us how you've successfully navigated the pandemic-driven disruption that is facing the world, the technology platforms that you are using for business transformation, how you see the evolution of multi-cloud, and also for telling us a little bit about some of the very exciting work that Federal Bank is doing in the fraud detection space by leveraging artificial intelligence, blockchain, etc. It was a real pleasure speaking to you, and there's so much that we've learned from you today. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you. Have a great day.